Imagine facilitating billions in facility and design decisions, all while keeping community voices at the center. What's the process that you use to help organizations make such critical decisions?
We help these organizations master plan for the future, help them figure out what they need, how they can prioritize.
I'm excited to explore how you're using innovation to bridge that gap between design, technology, and community. What are some trends that you see that have the potential to maybe reshape the future of architecture?
I think in general, people expect more. They expect a higher quality product. They expect a product or an outcome that has been vetted financially, been vetted by the community.
It tells you when you give people the right tools, just how creative they can actually get with those tools. What inspired you to start Go Architect, and what were some problems that you saw that you wanted to solve?
The beginning of Go Architect was definitely an exploration period. It took 2.5 years to come to terms with the only thing that is really working consistently is the master planning. One of the first things that we did and continue to improve on is how the proposals for a specific organization are getting to the public.
Imagine facilitating billions in facility and design decisions, all while keeping community voices at the center. That's exactly what Josh Santabria has achieved with Go Architect and his latest venture, Engage. Josh, I'm excited to explore how you're using innovation to bridge that gap between design, technology, and community. So welcome to the show.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
That's great having you here. Community engagement is always seen as like really challenging when you're doing architecture and design projects. So how has Go Architect ensured that community voices aren't just heard, but also central in the decision-making process?
Yeah, that actually has been one of the main things when I started Go Architect about 6 years ago. One of the first things that we did and continue to improve on is how the proposals for a specific organization are getting to the public. The very old school approach way back in the day was to have a physical copy that people would have to go to a city council meeting or something to receive a copy. Then we kind of upgraded, and maybe it was a PDF that was available, or if you're lucky, there was, again, something that was available to you statically. But that doesn't really do a great job when it comes to, for example, translating the plan for people of different ethnic groups. It doesn't do much in the terms of like having a video or some sort of other explainer tool. Obviously, people learn a lot from video. You really can't do that with a PDF or certainly a printed copy. So we focused on moving all of that to interactive websites, online platforms where people could watch a video, watch an animation, translate it if necessary, even run different scenarios where you have these interactive kind of cost components where you can play around with it. I think that minimum of accessibility is kind of where we started. And then from actual community outreach, we designed a program called Engage, which actually is a free program that anyone can use and go to. It's called engagebygo.com. And that tool takes a lot of the in-person community engagement that we do, for example, with sticky notes, write a sticky note and place it on a board. It takes that activity but makes it digital. So now you can upload an image and you can say, okay, allow every person to place 3 sticky notes. And then you can send that survey link to hundreds or thousands of people, and they can place their sticky notes on their own time, in their own language, etc. And then you can receive all of those things in your digital dashboard, and you can see what people say.
Feeling overwhelmed? Drowning into deuce? It's time to reclaim your life and transform your leadership. The Decentralized A-Team Handbook gives you the strategies to build a high-performing, autonomous team. Delegate effectively. Communicate with impact. achieve extraordinary results.
You can filter, again, you can export it, translate it, all that kind of stuff. So that's just an example of how we take something that's traditional, we apply a little bit of technology, and we come out hopefully with something that's useful to our clients, to the community.
So how do you think Engage is going to transform the way communities interact with big projects?
Well, hopefully, right? It's still very early stage, but my dream is that it is used on large scale projects where there's a lot of barriers, or at least perceived barriers, to get people involved. So, for example, I live here in Chicago. There's all kinds of public projects happening with the lakeshore, for example. And right now, you have to go to one of those meetings. You have to fill out the paperwork that they want you to fill out, participate, all that kind of stuff. And I don't really understand why that's the only method. I don't think we'll ever replace in-person community meetings, and maybe we shouldn't, but we can definitely subsidize or kind of merge tactics. So I would like to see it be used for a major project where community input is important and have it be an effective tool. It's good for qualitative research where people are typing their responses. It even has quantitative research where people are doing like ratings from 1 to 5 stars on the sticky notes. There's a bunch of different ways that you can use it. And I think we're just at the beginning of the journey.
To me, it sounds like a great idea because trying to get community buy-off on certain things is difficult. And not everybody has the time to attend a meeting, or maybe they're not feeling well. So even, having a virtual way to give their input is huge. And I applaud you for coming up with an idea like that, because it's one, I mean, I live in Las Vegas where I feel like they're constantly restructuring the roads nonstop. And there's a meme that goes around where there's like the construction guys in the orange, and they're like, okay, well, we need to start working on something over there. Because it's just what they do here. They interrupt the flow of traffic everywhere. They even put up cones for weeks and then never do anything, and then take the cones down. And just kind of go, not sure what you were up to here, but okay. So
For decoration.
what are some trends that you see that have the potential to maybe reshape the future of architecture? Some
Technological trends. Well, I think in general, people expect more. They expect a higher quality product. They expect a product or an outcome that has been vetted financially, been vetted by the community. There's just more expectations that when something is built, it's going to actually work for the people that it's designed for. Part of that is because buildings are extremely expensive, and there's no indication that they're going to be cheaper anytime soon. So it is, every hour that you spend on the planning hopefully saves you, thousands of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars later on. So I'm not sure that's exactly a technology shift, but it's definitely a shift in expectation. And so I think technology hopefully will help make that happen. I mean, an easy example is we have all kinds of software right now that uses AI to analyze a specific building site and whether it's a good fit financially, whether it's a good fit for the zoning, whether it maybe is performing well from a energy use standpoint. That's pretty much baseline at this point. I think we'll just continue to see that trend where there's more expectations that things perform well on smaller and smaller buildings. So, and you never know what like modular construction or 3D printing, who knows, that may yet have more impact than we think.
I've been a technologist for like 40 years. And when I saw 3D printing come out for the general public, I was like, what a dumb thing to give away. Until I started seeing the ingenious things people have come up with. It kind of tells you, like, when you give people the right tools, just how creative they can actually get with those tools. I see people online now selling like camera accessories that they've 3D printed. It's just brilliant. We've talked a lot about how you've used technology to give communities a voice in architecture. So if you were to design a project for a futuristic city on Mars, how would you engage a community that hasn't yet lived there?
Well, I mean, that is such a specific scenario. I would assume that in that case, your technological challenges would probably take precedent. So that would be a minimum, of course, is what are you dealing with? Speaking of Mars, I will say Mars has a lot of issues from a weather standpoint that we obviously don't deal with here. So subterranean construction seems to be kind of the way to go, or at least some construction that utilizes a lot of mass to protect the inhabitants from solar radiation, wind, and the sandstorms. So I would assume that that would be kind of the first round. And then once you're inside, I think you would have to design much like you would see a village in a anthropological museum or something. Some setup where you ensure that everyone has a role and their role is supported by their living environment. So you're not going to have suburbs where people are commuting. You're not going to have anything like that. You're going to have such a small kernel of people that live there for the foreseeable future that they're going to have to establish a lot more needs, like really basic needs of community, human interaction, human safety, kind of the eyes on the street or eyes on your neighbor component, rather than maybe what we can get away with now with kind of very isolated or separated inhabitants from work, from shopping, from everything else. We're going to have to go back to a real base model, I think.
Yeah.
So
how long has Engage been in use?
So we started building it last year, and then we used it on our first project. I think it's probably January or February of this year. So actually in use about 6 months. I would say that it's really only been very well developed in the last like 4 or 5 months.
Have you ever been surprised or inspired by any unexpected feedback from a community through Engage?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I will say not yet, to be honest. Everything seems kind of like what we would normally receive during an in-person. It has proven to be very useful. We can so there's kind of 2 versions of sticky notes. There's the one where you can just write and respond. And then there's another one that's kind of flipped, where instead of typing, you're just rating an idea 1 to 5 stars. And we, as the survey builder, can decide what people are rating. And that basically is a excellent way to, beyond a shadow of a doubt, actually quantitatively prove what people are prioritizing. And because it's so visual, because the sticky note that they're rating is on the image or on the board, there's no question about like what we're talking about. They can do it right there. We can average out the scores. So we're able to eliminate the kind of loudest voice wins syndrome that a lot of meetings can be disrupted by. We can take more of a true average or median score for a priority. It's not necessarily life-changing, but it is affirming to feel like you've made progress in actually one area of your work. That's kind of nice.
Yeah, no, this show keeps growing and growing, and the larger I grow, I start getting comments on videos, and sometimes I'm amazed at what people will comment on. Like I had a person on, it's a technology show, and I had a person on who had kind of a heavy Indian accent, but there's captioning, and someone said, could you translate that into English? I'm like, that's a really rude comment. You can read it, but I mean, whatever. But then sometimes you get questions about things that you say, that would make a great topic for an interview. We should talk to somebody about that. there's that old saying, there's the reason why there's 31 flavors of ice cream, blah, blah, blah. Everybody has a different taste. Well, it's really true though, because when you get feedback from a large group of people, what comes back sometimes shocks you. Like, you're not expecting what they believe in, and it can help guide the direction you take a project in based off of what they say. It was interesting to listen to you talk about the Mars thing, because I could see your brain, you were taking into consideration what some of the obstacles you were going to have to overcome there were. Like, you talked about subterranean development and stuff like that. And it's interesting because you're able to just shift from, normal development to some outer space development, but you didn't miss a beat with that. So I was quite impressed with that. So what's a project that you've worked on that was one of your most rewarding projects where technology and community engagement just played a huge role?
I am going to go off architecture for a moment, just kind of to a personal project. A couple of years ago, I was helping to produce online video classes about different creative topics. And I partnered with Ben Abbott. He's a judge on a history show called Forged in Fire. And they make basically really fancy knives. And it's like a competition show. And so I went out to Ben's forge in Virginia, spent a whole week with him filming this class about how to make these awesome knives. And I learned so much about his craft and his kind of process. And I was just so happy with how these things came out from a production standpoint. The video, everything came out. The curriculum came out very well. Ben is a great teacher. So I look back on that. It's been a number of years since we made that, but I would say that's still one of the coolest creative projects. And that bladesmithing community, it's literally an ancient art. And so people that participate in it, certain craftsmanship to them, certain hardiness, maybe a little bit of rebellion. It's an interesting group. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. So I was sitting here thinking, as a leader, we all know that people get put in positions of leadership without actually being trained to be a leader. So what's one piece of advice you would give to a newly appointed leader to help them with that type of scenario?
Well, I would say in general, anytime you're starting a new project or a new position or anything, I would break it down into the simplest possible steps or chunks you can. It's called a first principles approach. It's a physics-based approach. And basically you identify all the small elements that make up the whole, and you can improve or learn at least those elements in a much easier way than if you were to try to tackle everything at once, which might appear overwhelming. I kind of relate it to maybe in high school or college, you get the syllabus for the class that first day or two, and you think, oh my God, like how could I possibly finish all of these papers and all of these tests? Well, the only reason it really looks that intimidating is because you're seeing the whole semester's worth of work at once. But when you actually break it down into 12 or 16 weeks or whatever, yeah, you're going to be busy, but it's not like you have to finish everything on the first day.
Right.
New leadership position, a new project, create a list of all of the basic parts, prioritize them, things that are usually top priority, or if something is super expensive or super cheap, even, that can be kind of a red flag. Why are you spending so much money on something? Or if you're not spending very much money on it, is it actually just a distraction and it's not worth, even if you're only saving a little bit, maybe the mental energy or time is distracting.
I like that you link, though, the new position and projects as kind of being similar, because I think that anytime you take a new role, it is kind of like a new project for you to show that you can do it, right?
Yeah. So I think it is helpful to have kind of this mindset that it's not going to be permanent. and you can learn from each one. But, the kind of breaking things down, I think, is probably the single biggest advice. It helps you take very, very large things and make them much more approachable, less intimidating. And in the end, I think you learn more because you can focus on a few things at once or one thing at a time in series rather than just like this whole thing all at once.
Yeah, it is, because I read a book years ago about time management from Brian Tracy, and it was called Eat That Frog. Take your role and break it down into smaller parts and master each of those parts one at a time. And eventually you're going to come out as this really incredible person in that role. Too many people, I coach tech executives all the time, and one of their biggest complaints will be like, hey, I just put this person in charge of the development teams. They're now the lead developer. Well, like, they don't know what they're doing. Well, whose fault is that? Did you train them? Right. Yes. Where'd they come from? Were they part of your staff for a while? Because if they were, it's your fault that they're not understanding. And it's also your fault that they haven't gotten that understanding. Teach them to break it down into small parts. And, there's a reason why when you get onboarded into a company, they don't just go, look, here's all your tasks all at one time. It's like, all right, we're going to start you out with this small project right here, get you used to how our company works, and we're going to give you a little more, a little more. It's just those baby steps that
ideally
you eventually get to the other end of the path that you're going down. Unfortunately, it feels to me like most companies I consult with, they look at them as essential, but at the same time, as long as I can put somebody in their position that kind of knows what they're doing, we're going to be fine. And it's not really true. I feel bad for the person put in that position, because suddenly they're going from working like 45 hours a week to like 85 hours a week because they're spending so much time chasing their tail, trying to get something done, and they're killing their work-life balance because now they've got this new role and they don't know what to do. It's sad. But what about, what inspired you to start Go Architect, and what were some problems that you saw that you wanted to solve?
I would say that the beginning of Go Architect was definitely an exploration period. So I think to start off, I've always wanted to start a business and have started other businesses and other, let's say projects of different types since I was a teenager, right? So starting something was, I would say, relatively easy from a mental standpoint. The question always is, what exactly are you starting with? And for a little while there, I thought Go Architect would be more of a kind of publishing media company. We did the online classes production, like I mentioned. We did books, things like that. In the background, we were still doing these master plan projects for organizations, but that was very much in the background. And it took 2 years, 2.5 years to come to terms with, well, the only thing that is really working consistently and that we are confident we can grow is the master planning, work. And that's something that people are responding to. We're able to get new clients. We're able to charge enough to grow the business. And so it took 2 years to really accept that. And then once you do that, it's okay, now how do we actually make that come true? I was definitely very, maybe not distracted, but on the wrong trail maybe for a little while. Super broke for a while there too. But, there were a couple things that really were helpful. So I had worked for other corporate architecture firms. So I retained those relationships, and those people, or some of those people, eventually became my clients. So I was able to kind of keep that. It was a transition that would not have been possible if I had not worked for those firms. So that was an important lesson. Another thing too is that on a personal side, I was working and supporting my wife and I. She graduated from grad school and she started working, and she knew that I wanted to start a business. And so thankfully, we agreed that we would switch roles. She would start working full time and I would start the business. So it really is an investment of sorts. And so even though we've never had any investors formally, never done venture capital or anything like that, I would say the two categories of investors, or three really, are my former bosses and people that I worked with who became clients, my wife who became a supporter of the family. And then the third was the kind of early team members or employees that I recruited or found to work on stuff and who took time out of their own careers or put their own careers at risk to start with me. So you need to find your investors, I guess. They just may not always be traditional investors.
Right.
Yeah.
It's great when you have a spouse though that's supportive. So why don't you let the audience know where they can connect with you if they have questions or they might want to engage you?
Well, you can definitely reach me on goarchitect.com. So that's the kind of architecture urban planning side of the business. You can go to engagebygo.com and free for other people to use. Check it out. Use it for your own projects. It can be used for small businesses, marketing, lead generation, all kinds of stuff. And yeah, those are probably the two best ways to have people check it out.
Awesome. Well, those will get into the notes. And again, thank you so much for taking time today out of your busy schedule to be here with us. Thanks everybody for being here for another episode of Gaining the Technology Leadership Edge. New episodes every Wednesday at 8 a.m. Pacific time.